Welcome back to Leadership Lessons. It's an exciting day. I'm, of course, your host, Louis Howell, and I'm here with Mr. Keshav Bhatt, as usual. And we have a special guest today, Matteo from Shout Out UK. How you doing today, man?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us, man. Thank you very much for joining us. So, we usually, of course, start with a segment called Thanks for the Cut, which basically sees us share some experiences that we've had that have helped us to improve as an individual, just due to the fact that we are slightly short on time today because Mateo's a busy man, which is very understandable. But I think being busy is a good thing. I think being busy is a very good thing.
Especially when you're working on the cause that you're working on.
Yeah,
so
the cause and that's the thing. I want to go straight into that cause because I think, we started talking about it off camera and Kesh kind of stopped us like, no, please, can we capture this on camera because it's that powerful. So, we're going to skip Thanks for the Cut for the moment. And of course, we'll bring that back in the next episode. But we'd really love to go straight into who you are, Matteo, and what you do so that our viewers, we've got this online audience of around 25,000 young people who are really, really interested in, especially the reason why we've got you on today is because in the UK, we've had this snap election that's come out and that's going to be taking place at the start of June. And I thought to myself straight away, we need a thought leader. We need a real authority on that. And I think, there's no better person than yourself to speak about that and to also speak about how young people can engage with politics at this moment in time when it's so, so important that they do. So Matteo, first of all, would you like to tell people a bit more about yourself and Shout Out UK? And then we'll go into a few questions about, the political system and young people's engagement.
Yeah, no, fantastic for having me, you guys. And it's a hell of a time to be involved in politics right now. Election's going to be in 6 weeks. It feels like I haven't slept since it got announced. It's been intense. But so I run a company called Shout Out UK, and we are a youth news network that tries to get more young people engaged and involved in politics using journalism, film, events, and education as a means of doing so.
Definitely.
And the sort of journalism, it's a user-generated content platform. We've got just over 2,000 young writers that engage on the platform on a regular basis. They write articles, debate with each other, and so forth to create a community of young people to voice their opinions and essentially start to create that discussion around politics, which I think is massively lacking at the moment.
Definitely.
We do a load of events to, again, bring that community to politics, but we're making it very real to them. So we bring them into Parliament. We have events there. We had an event recently at the US Embassy where we took a load of our young people from sort of 8 different schools to debate around media literacy and so how we as young consumers can look at the media more critically, obviously using Brexit and the election of Donald Trump as a means of sort of looking at how the media can sometimes sort of cover or how they shouldn't cover things, which is
so I'm like really keen.
Yeah, of course, please jump in, bro.
Like the first question that I have for you actually is, what's the thing that worries you the most when you look at the political scene and the climate right now? You talked about Brexit, you talked about Donald Trump become elected as US president. We've got this snap general election now. What's the thing that, looking, especially from your perspective as the organization that you run, what worries you the most right now?
Twofold, but they're both interlinked. One is the complete lack of knowledge and political understanding I think most of us have. And it's not just, we deal primarily with young people sort of under 25s. But for most of us, we've never been taught politics. We've never been engaged in it from a school level, so you're just expected as soon as you hit 18 to have all this knowledge sort of thrust upon you as if it's some sort of epiphany, which obviously doesn't happen. And that mixed with the fact that because of that, all of our information comes from the media, and that is probably the most worrying thing imaginable because of how bad their coverage has been and is getting in the recent life. If you look at some of the stuff, that I don't want to say names of papers, but let's call them red tops for now. Like some of the stuff that they come out with is just pure garbage, like real garbage. And it's just, if you don't get any information in schools, you're naturally going to try and get your information from somewhere. And that somewhere will either be social media, Facebook, or actual print media.
Definitely.
The trouble is that on social media and Facebook, most of that information comes from the newspapers anyway, because they obviously publish their articles online and they then get shared on social media and so forth. So if you have no critical way of analysing what that is and taking that with a pinch of salt, saying, well, actually, is that the whole story? Or is that just a part of the story that this specific paper wants us to have because of their political alignment and so forth? Because you don't have that. You take it at face value and just take it in and be like, well, they said this and they said that, that's why I'm going to vote for this party. And it's just that kind of level of, I would say, lack of information is I would say, the most worrying thing.
One of the things that I'm doing a course at the moment, and we were talking about this in our first lecture, was identity politics. There is this very dangerous language now that it's us again, it's the people have spoken. So with Brexit, for example, 51% of people voted to leave. And that has now become the people have spoken. So to go against Brexit and to challenge the even notion of leaving the European Union, it's like you're going against the mandate of the people. But actually you're generalizing. There's still 49% who didn't want to leave. And that number may have changed now given the facts and the figures and how things have changed, especially that campaign slogan that we saw on the bus that they had. And it's very interesting that
millions came to the NHS.
Exactly.
Still cracks me up.
So it's interesting that that's also becoming the language of the campaigns and the politicians as well. Of if you look at both Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, they're both using and appealing to that populist language.
Yeah, because it shuts you up. Like, because you can't say, it's like, oh well, if you're against Brexit, you're clearly against democracy. What is wrong with you, tyrant? You know what I mean? Like that kind of natural progression.
If we break that down, what's actually happening there? Just to help people who are watching, like what's really at play there? If you kind of analyze the tools and the kind of devices politically, what do you see going on in there?
It's like you say, it's that us against them politics, but it's also an easy way of shutting out debate. You know, politicians want you to be a part of their campaign, want you to believe them, and if they can do that with as little debate and discussion as possible, then they will prefer that. And it also stems from the way the media have been doing. You know, the Daily Mail's been strung up about this all the time. You know, when the Supreme Court judges, for example, said that no, Parliament needed to debate Brexit. I mean, it's ridiculous that it didn't just go to Parliament straight away. I
can't remember the headline that they had.
It was something about how
they were against enemy of the people.
Enemy of the people, and they quoted these three judges, and these poor guys. You know, they had nothing incriminating, so they branded. I think one was homosexual, so they somehow turned that into something negative, and it's like, well, that is the information that most people get. You know, that is the most read paper in the UK, which again tells you something about where people get most of their information from. And the narrative that I think is going on there is that simply that with politicians, they saw how effective it was for Trump. They saw how effective it was in the Brexit debate. And Brexit would be incredibly hard because it wasn't a straight out win. You know, a couple of percent here and there. It was so divisive because over 40% of the people do not want to leave. So how do you deal with that as a government? And if you can just shut them up by saying, well, this is democracy, this is what we're going to go for, then of course you'd do it.
And I want to delve into that a little bit deeper, especially putting it into the context of young people, because what you guys are talking about there is interesting because that concept of sort of shutting out debate almost goes against what democracy and politics is about, because really the true essence, the true authenticity of politics and democracy is about being open to persuasion. That it's the idea that we should be able to have discussions and then find some form of solution and or conclusion that takes into account various viewpoints and perspectives. But if you purposely frame the situation and frame the environment in a way that means you essentially stop people speaking and just want to get, it's that concept of the quickest way to a point is a straight line. You're not looking to deviate and, sort of really explore what's going on. So my question to you was then, with your young people, for example, that, you spoke about the fact that Shout Out UK is a user-generated platform. You're going to get young people with different viewpoints who are looking to publish. So how do you guys go about ensuring that you are cultivating conversation in a way that allows people to express their different opinions and viewpoints, but also doesn't cause any form of harm or conflict or anything like that? How do you guys ensure that young people can engage in a way where they don't feel as if they're going to be, for example, penalized or victimized or singled out or anything like that?
So, I mean, we have a very, very strict editorial policy where we publish both sides of the argument at all times. Nice. And because of the fact that we don't align ourselves to any political ideology, we are completely neutral, partly because we go into schools as well.
Nice.
That automatically makes sure that there is a balance. So regardless of what opinion you may have as a young person, you will have backing of other young people that think the same way, but you'll also be contradicted by other young people that don't believe you. Corbyn's a big source of argument at the moment on the platform, just because there are a lot of young people that support him, as you probably know, but there's also a lot of young people that don't support him, who you may know less just because people care about less at the moment. But we publish both sides of those arguments. And also, constructive conflict isn't a bad thing. Like, we always see it as this horrific thing of, well, we can't get young people debating with each other, or conflict is bad, or debate is this and then. Well, actually, that's complete rubbish. Like, personally, I think safe spaces, for example, in schools and universities are actually a bad thing, because it makes you feel a lot. It puts you in this comfortable zone where everyone thinks like you, everyone agrees, so there's no point of debating, when in reality, that's not the world we live in.
Of course.
And if you don't debate, you don't discuss, you don't argue, you don't build up that emotional resilience where it's like, well, yes, you have an opinion, but someone is going to disagree with you. And if they disagree with you, fight back, say your point. Don't just keel over and move on. You know, debate's a good thing, and that constructive sort of discussion, I think, is a really good thing.
And how important do you think it is, and how impactful has it been, knowing that these are young people who are essentially debating things and speaking about politics with their peers? Do you think that the dynamic is more effective because it is people who they see as on a similar level to them? And do you think that it would, for example, be received in a slightly less better way, I don't want to say a worse way, but a less better way, if it was coming from, say, for example, a teacher or an adult? Do you find that it's better when it comes from, for example, their peers, because they're on this platform with other young people?
Yeah, no, definitely, because it's a lot less intimidating, obviously, because when you're talking to an adult or a teacher, there's always that sort of, I don't want to say patronising, but there's this idea that, you know, they are obviously older, so they know more, and it's part of also the way our educational system is built up, where you listen to the teacher, you regurgitate what the teacher tells you, you pass an exam, and then you move on in life. Whereas if you are with someone of the same age bracket, you tend to be a lot more risky, you tend to be a lot more open, just because, you know, you're on the same level playing field. You know, someone's not older, therefore has a lot more experience or whatever else. And it works really well. So part of what we do is also we run a political literacy course in schools, which is a 6-week course that teaches young people about introduction to British politics, dealing with how a bill becomes a law, separation of powers, local, national government, as well as international relations, so global north, global south. And finally, we do a lot around employability in politics, which teaches oracy skills. So public speaking, debating, and presentation skills, which are heavily emphasised throughout the 6 weeks. And in that, the facilitator, i.e. us that go into the schools, are there strictly as facilitators, as well as the chair of the debate, but they end up debating against each other, and some may come out with some, you know, ridiculous arguments, or some of the facts won't be correct, but that's not the point. It's about building up that confidence to say, yeah, you have an opinion, go out and voice it. It might be wrong, you may change your mind because of that, but if you don't voice your opinion, you're still going to hold those beliefs.
Yeah, definitely.
But no one's going to be able to change them because they don't know you hold those beliefs.
Definitely.
It's like, for example, you know, with when Brexit came out, there was this huge sort of uproar around with all the racism that was coming out in the UK, especially around the Polish communities and people coming from Pakistan and India and all that. And a lot of people saw that as sort of a very negative thing from Brexit. I actually saw that as something positive and there is something positive in it, because although the actual racism and all that xenophobia is a negative thing, that already existed. It's not like it came out because of Brexit. Yeah. It's just that now people felt confident enough to say it. It was
amplified. That's what it really was.
Exactly. It was amplified and people were open enough to say it. But now that they've said it, we can actually tackle it.
Of course.
If it's not said, then there's no way of actually engaging it.
Yeah, exactly that. Because if it doesn't exist, well, if you don't know it exists, then it's very hard for us to do something about that. I am conscious of time, so I was going to cover 2 more things. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
The key question that I guess, and I'm thinking of the guys people who are watching at home and on their phones and stuff, is you're obviously engaging young people politically, and I think you're speaking to the group that are engaged. And I'm not even going to say that young people aren't politically engaged. I think that they are, because voting is not the only way to be political. But I was just curious, you know, if you could share, what are some of the reasons that young people should get more involved, and what are some of the ways that they can do that? And I'm not just talking about when they go and vote in the snap general election. So, you know, in the build up to that, into the election, what are some of the things that you recommend young people go and do? You know, how can they separate, you know, fact from fiction? How can they build an informed opinion? What do you think some of the actions that they should take are, so that they can become more engaged, active citizens that are driving democracy, rather than being led by, you know, spurious claims in newspapers and things like that?
Exactly. So just to tackle your first point, it's like, there's a lot of misconceptions around voting is the only way you can engage. I think young people are incredibly engaged in politics. I would say more so than people actually give them credit for. So, you know, whenever we go into schools, for example, they do care about politics. They just don't see it as politics. So they will care about, say, human rights, green issues, police community relations, whatever it may be. It's a single issue. Yeah. They just don't see the connection between that and mainstream politics. And that is where I think that political literacy or lack of understanding comes in. Because you can campaign and engage as much as you want, but if you don't engage with the system eventually, nothing will ever change. So my answer to that, about what you can do, for example, obviously voting is one of them. But I would say read more than one news source. And the trouble with that is that it is very hard with the internet, where you've got 1,000,001 sources at your fingertips. Yeah. But just have a read of different sources. So if something, for example, when you read something in a newspaper and it automatically makes you angry, really frustrated, take a step back and look at it and say, well, why did it do that, because more often than not, the headline or the image or whatever else.
So it's almost like the more emotional it makes you, the more you should be questioning that and the agenda behind it.
Because there is always another side to a story.
What are some of the things that you do to keep yourself informed?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Because I've got things like Daily Peanut, Court's Daily Brief. I read The Economist. I read The Guardian. I read the Daily Mail sometimes if I'm in the right state of mind. But I'm trying to get as much a diverse range. But I realize we're all busy. So having things like a Daily Peanut or Court's Daily Brief, which give you summaries, are really good. Simple Politics are a really good platform as well. But I'm curious what some of the things you do are.
So just because of the stuff we do around the course and so forth, we end up having to read, The Guardian, as you mentioned, the New Statesman, I think it was. I do read the Daily Mail sometimes. I refuse to pick up the Sun, but the Daily Mail I do read just because it is. There is some interesting stuff in there, and it is something completely different. You can also go in and read stuff like the Canary and Breitbart. Again, two completely different news sources from the extreme ends of the two political spectrums. Left and right. But it is interesting to read and see what those two aspects do sort of say and so forth.
Definitely. And my final thing though is what is the importance of, for example, let's say you were a young person in a school that you haven't, for example, been in to deliver your program, and maybe they are passively looking at some of the information on Shout Out UK. Is it important that they begin to form some form of community around themselves, whether it is people from their school, in their class, their friends, and start to have these conversations individually? Do you think it's important that they start to build that community around them of people who are also willing to have those conversations? And if they do, how would you then recommend they link in with an organization like yourselves, or even like, for example, an organization like us?
I mean, first of all, it's definitely imperative, not just with us, but just in general, to engage between now and the general election. I would suggest having as many conversations with people as possible to widen your scope as much as possible. To engage in your teachers, question them like crazy.
That's so important.
Question them like crazy. Because often what we always forget, and I remember when I was a kid, a parent was incredibly annoying because I was always one of those kids that used to always ask why.
Oh, I was one of those. I was like, but you don't need to know that for the exam. I don't care. I'll know for life.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that they always tell you, they tell you how things work, but they don't expect the why.
Yeah.
And explaining that is so important. So question your teachers. They are there for that purpose. They're there to educate you. So question them like crazy. And then if you are going to build up that community and you want to engage more, obviously we're always looking for writers and people to engage in the platform, so you're all more than welcome. And if there is a need in a school of young people, we will always develop the course there. From September, we're digitizing the course, so individual young people that aren't in a school that have the program can take it on themselves if they want to. Obviously, by that point, the election will have been gone by a couple of months. But anyway, there's always the next one. So build that community, I think, is so important. Even talk to your parents if need be. The one thing that people always forget as well is that councillors and MPs are there for you.
Definitely.
The government, I think I quite like this analogy. It's like the government is like a company that we all own and we're all shareholders in.
Yeah.
And if you don't like something, a shareholder that doesn't like something, they will go and question the CEO. They will go and question the directors of the company. They're not just going to let it go because it's their money in the end.
Yeah.
So with this, why are we letting it go? If we don't like something, talk to your MPs. They also hold surgeries where they have to talk to people eventually.
Definitely.
So go over there and just talk to them. Doesn't matter if you're a 16 or 17-year-old kid, just talk to them. They'll be always willing to speak to you because they need your vote eventually.
That is so true. so true. Thank you so much. So where can people find you? Just, for our viewers and our listeners, where can people find you guys? What's all of the social media handles and the website? Please share that with everyone so they can engage.
Sure. So if you want to go on the website, it's www.shoutoutuk.org. The Twitter handle is shoutout_UK, and you can find us on Facebook at ShoutoutUK.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to put you on the spot real quick before we end. Prediction.
Ooh.
Ooh. We have to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Just given everything that's happening right now, where do you see it going?
I was wrong about Brexit. I was wrong about Trump. So I'm going to go risque and say Labour are going to win.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Just because, first of all, everyone is saying that Conservatives are going to win. The Conservative poll, they've got huge amounts of leads in the polls. And the same thing happened with Brexit and Trump, where they were complete outsiders. They didn't look like they were going to stand a chance, obviously, with Trump and the yes campaign, to leave. And because of that, I think a lot more people are going to mobilise towards Labour just because of how dire they think the situation is.
Okay.
A lot of young people, over 100,000 young people, I think, registered to vote recently, for example. So that's all, at least not a lot of them, going to be Labour supporters just because, young people tend to vote Labour. So because of all of that, I think that it might just be a Labour win. I could be a complete lunatic and maybe
You heard it here first. You heard it here first.
We got it on camera. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to wrap up just by sharing one final message for everyone who's watching, and that's, like you said, don't be afraid to have those political conversations. Don't be afraid to be wrong and to be corrected. Just have an open mind, question things, and really engage with not just this election, but future elections to come, and think about where it is that you stand on different issues, because those, I think, are the ways and the routes into politics. Because if you care about the environment or mental health or education, like you said, at some point you have to engage the system, because we have this mistaken view that politics is in Westminster, in London, and it doesn't affect you. Well, politics affects everything. Politics, what the word actually means, correct me if I'm wrong, is how we govern, how we run our society. So obviously you're going to want to have a say in that, because it affects you. So leave your comments down below. Let us know. The question of the day today is, what's the one thing that you learned that you want to hear more of, that you're going to go and study? Tell us what you're thinking about, when it comes into the lead up to the general election. And as always, guys, just remember, just like a bee gathers pollen from different flowers, absorb what's useful, discard what isn't, and add what's uniquely your own. Thanks for watching. Peace.
Peace.